Another refresher, it's the early 70s. The second tokusatsu boom is in full swing, and a lot of Ultraman-inspired heroes are coming out of the woodwork. Among the companies making the attempt is one you might not have heard of. Enter Senkosha Productions, and on October 8th of 1972, they begin airing a new show. It's got actual story arcs, a superhero powered by H2O, a Japanese cowboy, and a lot of this. So grab a cup of water, it's important to stay hydrated, because today, we're talking about one of the most uniquely crazy giant superhero shows of the 70s. It follows two characters sharing protagonist duties. Gentaro is a rude yet righteous cowboy straight out of a spaghetti western who's working as an agent for the Japanese government. He's rough around the edges, kind of a bastard too, but he can be a gentleman every once in a blue moon. Accompanying him is Goro, a bumbling sweetheart ordered by Professor Tsushima to protect the cowboy. Unbeknownst again, Goro's been modified into a cyborg, and by touching two medals on his red hat, he's able to transform into the hero Iron King. If Goro is in trouble, Gen comes running. That's how tight their unlikely bond is. These two are really charming together. Their relationship is the highlight of the show. It's an interesting series. It takes what you know about Ultraman, what with the giant monster of the week elements, then it takes some dramatic cues from something Shotaro Ishinomori would write, and it creates something somewhat unique when compared to its contemporaries. Nothing is done that changes the average structure of an episode. It remains formulaic the whole time, but the faces we see on the side of the bad guys do change as the show progresses. Plus, there are admirable efforts to spice up the fight scenes and set pieces with different locations and monster abilities that promise something wild and fun in every episode. There are three distinct arcs here. First, we see the conquest of the Shiranui clan, no relation to Mai, who use an army of humanoid robots. Immediately following them is the nefarious Phantom Militia, a terrorist group who make use of robotic dinosaurs. The duo's final opponents are the Titanians, a race of aliens who can turn into giant bugs. I will say, showing the lineup of monsters the enemy faction has, that's a cool way to hype up the kaiju we'll be seeing next. It's also something that Kakaider did, so it's another way Ishinomori influenced the series. What's cool about doing story arcs like this with different factions is that it justifies the monsters looking different. That's great for variety. Giving each faction their own genre of monster helps each one stand out, even when their motivations are more or less the same. Now, to address the obvious, you might be wondering why the footage for this show looks like one of the movies I've covered on one of my Mill Creek Halloween specials. That's because that's just the state of this show's release in the West. Also, this was literally released by Mill Creek. I swear I can't escape these guys. A Blu-ray release for this show does exist, but it's Japan exclusive. A full set seems to be pretty expensive. So don't pause at any point, or else you'll be subjected to the fattest pixels I've ever allowed on Ultra Gaiden. Iron King's design is pretty derivative, which isn't really an issue, but when I look at him I can't help but see Ultra 7. His fighting style is surprisingly limited for a hot minute too. It takes until episode 9 for him to demonstrate any sort of projectile attack. But really, he's not the sole draw of the show, as weird as that is to say about a series named after him. Because his time limit is 1 minute, it never actually is because of time dilation, it's usually Gen who has to come in and rescue him from the monster. He's the real star. With his trusty rapier that turns into a whip, he can hold his own against the monster of the week reasonably well. Across 26 episodes, I counted
6 times
where Iron King was the one to land the finisher, and it takes until the tail end of the series for these victories to start piling up. I've got a headcanon. I like to think that he naturally got stronger and developed increasingly elaborate techniques that helped him win fights on his own. There's no reason why he couldn't have been using laser beams from the start if that wasn't the case, so I think it makes sense. Iron King was not Senkosha's first attempt at a Kyodai hero show. The preceding year they released the currently untranslated, very intriguing Silver Kamen, an Akio Jisoji joint. It starred a human-sized hero at first, but 11 episodes in, they gained the ability to transform into a giant, making the show a little more like Ultraman. For Iron King, they seem to have combined the human and monster-scaled action. We not only get several fight scenes with Gentaro fighting off whoever the evil team of the arc is, not just monster fights with Iron King, but both, usually at the same time. It's a breath of fresh air for a giant superhero show, honestly, that these two need to double-team the monster to get anything done. It means there's a lot of cutting between two scenes, the ground-level fights and the monster fights. They're so ferocious and high energy thanks to the quick cutting and camera work. Fights with Iron King are a blast. There is a level of monotony to this show's structure. I know it's normal for a lot of Showa toku to be repetitive, but they literally reuse the premise of a sister being sad that her brothers joined the terrorist group twice. Ignoring that, holy shit, some of these sequences are crazy. I can forgive a lot of the repetition just because this show can be so ridiculous. You know how in Ultra shows, the supporting characters rarely, if ever, put two and two together that the guy who disappears during fights might be Ultraman? Well, Iron King takes that suspension of disbelief to another level. It takes an embarrassingly long time for Gen to realize that, hey, Goro might be Iron King, despite the mounting evidence from day one. It goes from circumstantial to pretty f***ing obvious, dude. He knows Iron King was made by the professor. This guy suddenly tags along saying he's on orders from that same professor. He disappears whenever the giant superhero is around. Gen knows Iron King needs water, and Goro's always slurping it down the next time he sees him. Even the terrorists figure it out before him. I guess he's too distracted by the female companion of the episode. I don't really think I'm equipped to talk about this next bit, but the topic is kind of unavoidable with this show. The way this show writes women is pretty indefensible. I'm a little worried when a new woman tags along because they're all written to act like scared puppies who can't help but fall in love with Gen, who's very dismissive of them if they get in his way. Might want to trade in that cowboy hat for a fedora, dude. His attitude, and more obviously his aesthetic, have roots in westerns. The Italian perspective especially, whose flawed heroes existed to demystify the clean image of the American cowboy. The occasional juvenile perversion is a Japanese invention. A character can be amoral and still be interesting, and Gen is very interesting. The sexism baked into his character does lead to some effectively tragic moments. But when nearly every woman in the show acts the same, either being emotionally unstable or caught in the line of gunfire, I get the sense that they were written like that just to prop up this one guy, and it comes off as ham-fisted. Yukiko is the earliest companion, and she's around the longest, so I can actually buy her falling for Gen because they build it up. And his downright misogynist behavior is at least a little understandable in context, because he somehow instinctively knows she's trying to kill him and Goro. Yeah, she's trying to kill them at first, kinda glazed over that. Even so, it's still representative of this show's weird relationship with women, and I just find it mean-spirited. The women are easily the worst written characters in the show. It was definitely a different time. Shout out to the nun who knows Goro's secret identity because of her faith in God. That's awesome. And you know, at least the rest of the show was fun enough for all of this sexism to not be a huge issue. But Gen's aversion to meaningful romances does bring up an interesting question. Are Gen and Goro a gay couple? Just because these two guys who travel alone with each other and are maybe sometimes a bit vulnerable with each other, that doesn't mean they're gay. In the interest of providing as much context as possible, the show gives them a lot of female love interests. Yeah, when they're playfully teasing their female companion by having Goro pretend to be her getting married to Gen. Yep, that's just teasing. Nothing to read into there. I originally had more analysis here, but it prattled on for too long. God, you have no idea how many revisions I went through. But in short, Gen gets along better with Goro than anyone of the opposite sex. You either headcanon it or you don't. Maybe they're bisexual. Me personally, I applaud them for accidentally creating a gay power couple. It's a memorable dynamic even without that reading. Much of Iron King's special effects staff previously worked at Subaraya in some capacity, and it shows. Even the Gamera series' Noriaki Yuasa got involved, directing episode 8. Delightful stylization, impressive camera work, inspired lighting and blocking, Iron King looks great for the time. Sometimes these fight scenes can be entertaining for being so unprofessional. Even the intro sees a couple revamps as the show continues. The freeze frames for the actor title cards were made to look less terrible. Like seriously, early on they just freeze frame in the middle of this blurry shot of them. It's awful. The outro sees some changes too, going from this sparkly, abstract background to incorporating footage of the actors. It changes for the other arcs too. Wait, how did the horse come back? Speaking of intros, channel favorite Masato Shimon did this show's, as well as the outro. On the subject of music, the soundtrack was composed by Shunsuke Kikuchi. He's done music for Gamera, Kamen Rider, and Dragon Ball, and he doesn't slouch for this soundtrack either. It's very catchy. The show's main writer was Mamoru Sasaki, who previously wrote several Ultraman episodes and was an associate of Akio Jisoji. He seems like an interesting character. Based on his political activity, he seems pretty left-leaning, not a big fan of the government. Plus, he's supported the liberation of the Ainu, one of Japan's indigenous groups. In fact, learning that, I can see that his anger with the government was repurposed into being the motivation for the show's bad guys. The Shiranui clan is a group whose existence goes back 2,000 years, and their motivations are to overthrow the Japanese government after years of oppression. The Phantom Militia has the same goal too. Because our hero Gentaro works for the government, he acts as one of its agents just following orders to exterminate these groups. It's even suggested that he just likes fighting for the hell of it. Government be damned. He usually does the right thing in the end. If anything, imperfections like this make him a more interesting character, but he's not exactly written to be the most aspirational person. That's how I think Sasaki was able to feel comfortable writing a show where marginalized groups were the bad guys, by allowing the main character to be morally complex. It's a pretty heavy topic for a show aimed at a younger audience. I gotta respect it. Both of the lead actors, Shoji Ishibashi and Mitsuo Hamada, agreed to appear in the show because of Sasaki's involvement. Ishibashi even joined with the stipulation that Sasaki needed to write every episode. I didn't know anything about this guy before I started doing research for this video, but my takeaway is that his involvement in the show makes people interested. The Titanians are a curveball. After 2 consecutive human teams focusing on terrorism, it's refreshing to see something as random as alien invaders. They've got a memorable look. I dig the pilgrim hats and Rejuveneek masks. Plus their introduction is pretty creepy. I'd imagine this scared a lot of kids. They also do stuff like this, so they're not too threatening. It's an incredibly specific comparison. I've been watching too much Ultraman. But the way the Titanians run and the way those scenes are shot are very similar to the Ultraman Ace episode with the panda-stealing alien Steel. Both shows would have crossed over into 1973, so I guess this was just the year of aliens in capes running past wide-angle lensed cameras. There were plans for a fourth story arc, but they fell through since the ratings weren't good enough. I do think the show ends well enough for it to be satisfying. There's a 2-episode finale that helps prevent it from feeling like an abrupt Tsuburaya conclusion, which was an epidemic at the time. It ends with the full version of the outro too. I love it when a show does that. There's actually a funny rumor surrounding the ending of Iron King. The channel TV Saitama was rerunning it through 1985 and 86, and the broadcast abruptly ended after the penultimate episode, where Goro gets possessed by one of the Titanians. So for the longest time there were playground rumors about an Ultraman show that ended with the hero turning evil and destroying the city. That's some creepypasta shit right there. Also very funny that this show was mistaken for Ultraman. Fell right into that trap. Iron King is a surprise hit for me. Obviously there are things that kind of annoy me about it. It was a different time. But I still enjoy the overall show quite a bit. The pacing is blisteringly fast, so there's rarely a boring moment. Something crazy and unexpected happens in every episode. It can be hilariously out of pocket. The filmmaking and production design are wild and lend the fight scenes a lot of energy. I'm enamored by the absurdity and charm of the special effects. The directors had to get creative, and I appreciate it whenever they do. And I love Gen and Goro to death. They're so atypical as protagonists. It really helps this show stand out. It's more than just an Ultraman knockoff. A magical combination of elements happened here, and it created something that's really its own breed. I actually think it's better than some of the Ultraman shows that were coming out around the time. Maybe I'd need to be more well-versed in 70s superhero shows, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a show like Iron King. It's sincere, it's goofy as hell, and it's definitely not perfect, but I love it. There isn't much to point to in the way of Iron King's lasting impact. It came out as another Ultraman-adjacent show. Literally, since Ace was airing at the same time. It's an incredible Ultraman-like show, sure, but that's the perception, and it can't shake that. It hasn't enjoyed the same decade-spanning saga that the Ultra series has. So, instead I ask, what happened to its heroes? Where are they now? Well, starting with the studio, Senkosha Productions doesn't really exist anymore. Its larger company does, under the name Senko Kikaku, but they specialize in advertising. Even back when they were making Iron King, they existed thanks to a partnership with TBS that gave them funding to make shows like this. Among those produced shows was the previously mentioned Silver Kamen, or Silver Mask, and another of Senkosha's tokusatsus to reach the United States as a bargain bin Mill Creek DVD is the mech series Super Robot Red Baron, no relation to the pizza. It also got a sequel, Super Robot Mach Baron. For now, I'll just watch those on my own time. If I start covering Super Robot shows, I'll make sure to add those to the list. It's a slippery slope, and it ends with me talking about Gundam, so I'll keep that can of worms closed for now. What about the actors? Shoji Ichibashi, who played Gentaro, went into the show with an idol career. That's why he sings and carries around a guitar. He actually played this vengeful character named Saburo in the Terochilus episodes of Return of Ultraman, to tie this back to the Ultra series in some way. Ichibashi has since fathered 6 kids, and his last acting credit was in 2011, but he's continued working in stage productions. Nothing that I think an audience outside of Japan would be familiar with, but it's okay to leave a low profile. He's doing fine. Before I forget, I was scrolling through his credits, and one of them is in the detective drama Yoake no Keiji, Google translated to Detective at Dawn, and he appeared in an episode titled That. So that's fucking awesome. Goro was also played by an idol, Mitsuo Hamada. He appeared in a number of Nikatsu's movies, and enjoyed a meaty television career. One of his roles actually being a supporting character in Ultraman Gaia. I swear you'd have to actively try not to cross paths with the Ultra series if you were in the Japanese entertainment industry. He was interviewed about this show in 2001, where he says it was one of his favorites to work on. Hamada ended up winning a Golden Glory Award from the Japan Movie Critic Awards in 2016, which is for those who've made great cinematic achievements, so he's also doing fine for himself. Even Iron King seems to be living a more humble life now. Last year he was promoting a water conservation event, something he more than anyone would know about. I was really happy to see this when it popped up in my feed. Alright, what are your watching options for this show? Well, if you have the money to spare and the software know-how to transplant the existing subs, the Japanese Blu-rays exist as an HD option. For the dirt poor, me, there's the current Mill Creek release. Worth mentioning that most of the episodes have delayed subtitles, so you're unfortunately gonna have to whip out VLC and try to time them yourself. It's strangely comforting to know that Mill Creek didn't give a shit about quality control back then too. This is actually a cheaper reissue of a 2007 release done by BCI Eclipse. Their release comes with a booklet containing production info, which is where some of my research comes from. Thanks to one of my followers for scanning it for me. I'll post an archive link in the description. I don't think Iron King necessarily needs a follow-up, but it would be nice if more people knew about it. I'm hoping I did my job correctly. It's a show that deserves a look. It's too absurd to not deserve it. Iron King is truly underrated. Check it out. Iron King. Wow, that's crazy. 2 Ultra Gaidens in a row. I'm not sure what the performance of this one's gonna be, but I had fun making it. This one's probably seen the most research I've done for any of them. If you want to see me incorporate more production info into these videos, let me know. I think they make the videos better. But yeah, thank you for making it to the end. Here is a shout out to the top patrons, who not only help make videos like this one possible, but also get them a little bit earlier than everyone else. Dinosaurana, Kadorian, Scooter Jit, Mago Muddy, Chris Space Cowboy, Lobotomy Blues, Cool Bell Zero, Pack Jeff, Johnny Hedgewolf, Eric Guzda, Jonos Firewalker, Easterman, Macho Mantis, Manila Fan, Sampai, Big Dumb Media, Navik 15, Jacob Hinch, Dude Bro, Alistair Gilmore, Seamus Kelly, Anonymous Euronymous 1349, Fujoshi Urinal. That name's insane, by the way. Have I ever said that? Grazio, Mulan Nguyen, Irrelevant 402, Krazak 53, Queer Kaiju, Chronicler Waba, Alcoholic Alligators, Ryan Santa Cruz, Avok Robot, The Antagonist, Godzilla Rich, It's God Z, An Actual Dimetrodon, CMG, Red Comet Harry, and Marpzilla. Thank you all very much.